Okay, let's. Okay, so I'm Srikant Das. I'm working as a manager in the BI and growth team at Noon.com. So it's a Middle East based company. Prior to this, I have worked with Badi.com, InfoEdge, and BHL. So before doing my MBA, I worked in public sector and I was in project like power sector itself. So I'm a manufacturing engineer, like mechanical engineer only. And then in last 3 years, I have ventured into AI and ML part. So mostly like a data science team. I joined data science team with Vadi.com, and then I joined a sixth district as a BI manager. Then I came to Noon.com as BI manager. So things are going like this. Before we proceed to our presentation, right? Give me a minute. Before we proceed to our presentation, I'm just hoping that not everyone is an expert in AI ML. Some of you might have gone through a lot of papers and you have gone through courses and everything, so you might be having quite good understanding. But some of you might be totally naive in this field and may not be knowing a lot of things over here. So for that regard only, what I will doing is like I will be giving examples from e-commerce, as well as I will be taking through individual algorithm and everything, right? Before starting, what I will do is I will show you a 2 minutes video. Right? It's an interesting video to get you guys' attention.
On Earth, the simple rules of natural selection and competition led to the evolution of increasingly intelligent life forms. Today, we ask if comparably simple rules of multi-agent competition can also lead to intelligent behavior in a new virtual world. These agents are playing hide and seek. These agents have just begun learning, but they've already learned to chase and run away. This is a hard world for a hider who has only learned to flee. However, after training in millions of rounds of hide and seek, the hiders find a solution. The hiders learn to use rudimentary tools to their advantage. By grabbing and locking these blocks, they can create their own shelter. The seekers are locked in place for a brief period at the start of the game, giving hiders a chance to prepare. Even so, the hiders must learn to collaborate, accomplishing tasks that would be impossible for any single individual. The hiders are not the only ones who can learn to use tools. After many generations of failing to break into the shelter, the seekers learn to jump over obstacles using ramps. However, after many millions of rounds of having their shelter breached, the hiders learn to take away the primary tool the seekers have at their disposal. Note that we did not explicitly incentivize any of these behaviors. As each team learns a new skill, it implicitly changes the challenges the other team faces, creating a new pressure to adapt. We've also put these agents into a more open-ended environment, randomizing the objects, team sizes, and walls. In this way, they learn to construct their own shelter from scratch, requiring that they arrange multiple objects into precise structures. To prevent seekers from using the ramps, the hiders move them to the edge of the play area and lock them in place. We originally believed this would be the final strategy that the agents learn. However, we found that after more training, the seekers discovered that they can jump on top of boxes and surf them to the hider's shelter. In the last stage of emergent strategy that we observed, the hiders learn to lock as many boxes as they can before constructing their fort in order to defend against box surfing. So how do agents acquire these skills? They're trained using reinforcement learning, an algorithm inspired by the way animals on Earth learn. The agents play thousands of rounds of hide and seek in parallel for many days. They train against each other, as well as past versions of themselves, using an algorithm called self-play. Coevolution and competition on Earth led to the only genuinely intelligent species known to date, humans. While this world is far less complex than Earth, we have found evidence that simple rules can lead to increasingly intelligent behavior from multi-agent interaction. We hope that with a much larger and more diverse environment, truly complex and intelligent agents will one day emerge.
So I hope you guys like this video. You can find these kind of videos on OpenAI channel, right? So that is one channel you can start following. Okay, so in this webinar, what shall be covered and what shall not be covered? One more thing, in case I disconnect due to certain internet issues, Give me from some 4 or 5 minutes time. I will reconnect from my other system. So there won't be an issue like longer. You don't have to wait much longer, right? So that is one thing from my side. Next, so what all things will be covered? So we will be covering the core concepts of machine learning, few examples from ML, both in respect to e-commerce as well as with respect to whatever is being done in the industry itself. Then some of the resources that are required for machine learning and some good practices. Then we will talk about supervised and unsupervised learning as well as reinforced machine learning. And then we will talk about machine learning algorithms, deep learning, and the higher concept, what all are there. And we will be demystifying some of the algorithms, right? So we won't be covering the coding part in this case because it will become like we cannot cover each and everything in such a short duration. So coding, we will try to avoid it. I will try to show one example in case it is necessary, right? So that is how this is going to be now. So what is the classical machine learning concept, like classical definition of machine learning? So as per what I've searched on Wikipedia, so machine learning is the study of computer algorithms that improves automatically through experience. So whatever data set you provide, so there is a training data set, you have a test data set, and you also have the validation data set. So you provide the training data set, the machine learns on the basis of training data set, it tries to validate using validation data set, and there is the test data set on which it tries to implement the same algorithm and checks whether the algorithm is, how much accuracy is there with respect to that algorithm. So we will be talking about training and test data sets in the like upcoming slides. So that's the whole concept of machine learning, like what you say in a brief. How AI, ML, deep learning, and data science are different. Data science, we in the BI team, most of the time we do the data science job because you have to take out the sales report, or maybe on a daily basis you have to pull out data, some data, you have to do some sort of analysis. You won't be needing any kind of training of data for those things. You will be needing only, you need to make a graph of how your sales is going on. So those kind of things are coming under data science. So most of the job you land up, like people land up into, are mostly into data science, and then slowly they go to AI, ML, and deep learning. So AI is a broader concept of ML and deep learning. AI consists of your what you say algorithm based also. So in AI you can have a static algorithm, you need not to train the data. So that's the whole concept of AI. It can be sequential data or it can be sequential algorithm. So suppose if and if else loop sort of thing. So you can use like if else in AI, but in ML it's a totally different concept. In ML you are having total data set, have to train the data set, and on the basis of training, the machine will learn where to use which weightages. So mostly in machine learning, we decide the weightages according to the loss function. So that we will look into in the upcoming slides. And then we have the deep learning. Deep learning is a far narrower concept. So mostly artificial intelligence, like a artificial neural network, then convolutional neural network, and other like Boltzmann machine. All these things come under deep learning. So you expand the network and you have multiple hidden deep layers. So that's why it's called deep learning. How it is different from ML? In ML, you don't have too many layers. In deep learning, you have multiple layers. So you have to, suppose you have 10 layers, you will be having thousands and thousands of weightages over there and sigmoid function, like the activation function. In normal ML, you will be having only one activation function, only one or few weightages. So that's how it is different, right? Resources and best practices. So most popular, like what you say, scripting languages are R and Python. So I used to work on R previously in my previous organizations, and like R is quite capable of doing all your machine learning job. But the thing is, with Python you get better flexibilities because you have official support from a lot of organizations like Google or Facebook. PyTorch is a library of Facebook, and TensorFlow is a library of Google. So you get quite a lot of official support. Second one, this is an like a overall scripting language. So you can design a web page out of all these things. So that's why Python is somehow preferred as compared to R. but don't underestimate R. You can do each and everything with respect to data science in R itself. When you can use it to showcase your data using Shiny and everything. So these are the two major scripting languages for what is your IDE. I can say IDE for machine learning, right? Then libraries I have discussed, we have Caret, dplyr, random forest, ggplot. In R, then for Python, we have NumPy, Pandas, sklearn, Cvont, TensorFlow, PyTorch, Matplotlib, and Keras also. So I haven't missed the Keras over there. Good practices, it's always a good practice to store you need to store your data as a version in GitHub. So having a version control is always a good practice. So like everyone in the computer science department knows how to use Git, so it's a really good practice. So obviously some of you might be using, and some of you might take a hint from here that okay, we should start using Git. It's really easy, and it helps you modify your algorithm. Like suppose you have applied a certain kind of algorithm in one of the Git files, one of the branches, and you have applied another algorithm in another branches, and you can just test which of them is working fine, and you can just merge it into your main algorithm. So those are kind of things work. Few of the data sets are like data.gov is there. If you search data.gov, or even BigQuery, we have public data sets. So these are the links which we will be sharing through slides here, and you will be able to click on the link and will be able to download more than some 34,000 data sets are there available on these websites. So you can use those things. For daily updates, you can use Towards Data Science. It's a Medium article, kind of magazine sort of thing, and it's an online thing, and then you have analytics with there. So you can use these to keep update of whatever is happening in AI and ML. So leading organizations include TensorFlow, OpenAI. They have their own channels also. You can follow the channel. And Kaggle is a competition website where you can register or ask your students to register on Kaggle, and they can start taking part in the competition. They have prize monies as well as learning data sets also. So it's a very good competition website, right? Going forward, I will be taking up the examples from e-commerce industry and what all we do. I won't be specifically talking about Noon.com because it is being confidential. So, but still, I will tell you what all are being happening in our company and in e-commerce in general. I have listed out total 10 of the divisions that exist in e-commerce. First one is the upper management. So how upper management take advantages of AI and ML, right? The first thing is sales prediction. So we have suppose we are having a Ramadan, like tomorrow or day after tomorrow we are having Eid. So we might be running a campaign, and we want to know how much sales is happening. So we will be having past data with respect to previous Ramadan season as well as this Ramadan season. And since we are suffering from COVID, we will be having seasonal data and a lot of things. And since we have grown in size, earlier we might be doing 20 millions per day. Now we are doing 30 millions per day. So we cannot compare apple and oranges. So we have to compare apple with apple. So that's where AI comes in, and ML comes and plays its part. So you start predicting the sales over there by using machine learning. So you have regression models and other sort of models. So we use multiple linear regression to predict the sales over there. Then you have investor reports. So in investor reports, you might be predicting how much, you go to investor and you pitch for the money. So they need to provide you the money, that if this much money is required. So you need to project how much cash outflow might be there. In that case, you can predict, okay, my driver is charging this much. So if there is inflation and those sort of things, a lot of you might be recruiting more drivers and all these things. This is the whole scenario will be there. We are going at this rate. So this investor report can be built totally based upon ML. Then we also have payments. What happens sometimes whenever you are making a card payment, and sometimes we have CC Avenue, PayU, and a lot of other different payment gateways are there. Sometimes what happens, those payment gateway stops working, or there might be some issues with the end of bank. So it's a loss for the e-commerce company if the payment gateway is not working. So predicting the error in payment gateway is quite necessary. So early prediction models are really important when it comes to payment failure. So if we are having some problem, we call it anomaly in payments. So even there are minor changes in a certain like postpaid method or prepaid method, we will highlight it to the concerned team so that they can take a solution, they can resolve those issues. Uh, with respect to finance, we have OCR, invoice reading. So OCR is optical character uh, recognition. So there's one scanner will be available, and see, most of the time, like in India, if you buy certain goods from some vendor, small vendor, so they will provide you in a manual handwritten sheet. So it's difficult to like replicate each and every one of them like directly to the computer. So what we do is like we have a scanner and we have the OCR method, like it recognizes the characters. So it uses ML. So it is, these features are also available on your phone also. So if you like search for Google Lens, Google Lens will be able to scan your handwriting and read it out. So that works on OCR method. So that is there. Then calculation of PC1 and PC2. So the profit calculation by taking certain um, factors into account, whether it's a good season or not. So you can calculate the PC1 and PC2, and you can project how much profit you will be making in the future, right? Search. This is one of the most important area where you can see the use of AI and ML. First one is product ranking, which I work on. So product ranking, we take the use of MLR only. So in multiple linear regression, we have the product ranking. So we have millions of product, and we have to rank it each day based upon the customer visits, the session, how much they are buying, how new the product is, how like how much, in how many days can it be delivered, then for how much weightages should I give it to individual what you say category, so that my profit increases. So this product ranking algorithm is totally built upon ML only. Then we have search suggestions. So whenever you start typing any keyword, so it automatically detects, okay, this keyword respond to, maybe you start typing A, so it will start suggesting Apple iPhone 10 or Apple iPhone 11. So that prediction, so because it predicts that the first keyword, if someone has entered A as first keyword, they mostly tend to enter Apple AirPod or some sort of product. So those sort of things comes in search suggestion. In CRM, this ML is also really important because we use customer segmentation. We divide the customers into various parts, right? So suppose someone has bought the item 30 days ago, and right now they are not buying anything from grocery. So we will be able to send them a specific notification with respect to grocery item. So I will say that, okay, if you buy grocery item at this much and these 5 items, I will provide you this much discount. So that's how the whole CRM thing will be working, right? Then merchandising, like it is not being used in our organization, but a lot of people are using it, like personalized banners. You get recommendation at your bottom. Then product bundling is there. Suppose you buy one item, so it will show you another item along with that. So frequently bought together items are there. Then in tech, we use A/B testing and code suggestion. So whatever code you have written, so it will automatically suggest whatever code. Like suppose you're using pandas and you have a certain specific data frame. So once you write pd.d, so it will it will automatically complete the whole data frame itself. So that's how the code suggestion works. Then content score is one more important area where this ML is like highly influential. First one is the content score. So it works on text classification. We have lot of contents. Suppose you have category of product where you have t-shirts and everything. So we should be able to properly identify those products. So we will say that, okay, this one is having so many characters, so many good characters are there. These are having this many affirmative characters. So we can identify those products as a good product. And there are certain products which are not really good. So the character might be quite less. The content is not that good. The image quality is not good. Then we have the product mapping. what happens in e-commerce is lot of time. Uh, if suppose we want to go to stationery, like we bought some stationery item, and see everything is being done manually. You upload a manual sheet, CSV sheet, and sometimes by mistake you have put up instead of stationery you have put it under clothing. So your pen will be going into clothing instead of stationery. Although it is a lot of QC are being done, but sometimes there might be certain errors. So we do product mapping sort of thing over there. So we identify the product, right, by using the keywords, and we say that no, this product, like it is pen, it should go to stationery and not to clothing. So that is where product mapping comes into figure. Then we have image mapping. So similar to content, we have the image also. So we identify image. For example, um, when you go and buy a t-shirt, you see that my frontal, ventral, and sideways images are available. Then only you are going to see, okay, size is mentioned and everything is there. So you identify those product only. So you do an image mapping. Okay, my clothing is showing the front side as well as back side. You cannot do it manually for each and individual uh, images, but you can do it using like a ML. So automatically it will identify that, okay, this image is with respect to front of the t-shirt. So for this individual SKU, we are having all the 5 sections. Front image is there, back image is there, left side image is there, right side image is also there, and we are also having the size chart. So that's how the image mapping works. Operations, we have product returns. So a lot of times what happens is people return the product. So what happens is not always we have a retail customer. We also have wholesale customers who stock the product, who hold the product. So you might be a shop owner and you see that, okay, my I can see that a certain product is being sold at Amazon at a really cheap price as compared to my dealer. So I will buy that item and create a fake sort of invoice, and then I will sell that item, sort of thing that happens. So we try to identify, and then if those items are not being sold within 10 days, they will return it. So we identify that, okay, this is my wholesale customer who is trying to cheat on us, or who is trying to return the product. Then finding optimal routes. E-commerce, we have to take a look. Okay, delivers around 1,000 of products in single truck. So identifying the key route is really important to reduce the carbon footprint, as well as with respect to your oil expenditure and lot of other things, to reduce the delivery time also. Lot of things happen. So finding the optimal route is one of the areas where it works. Then we have inventory management, how many products, like minimum products you should keep in your inventory. So for different items, the minimum product requirement is totally different. For suppose you have clothing. In clothing, you can keep 5 or 6 products, but with respect to phones, you have to keep around 1,000 product in your stock. With respect to a certain different kind of phone, suppose some less known brands, suppose Alcatel. Alcatel, you have to keep only 10 quantities in your stock because you won't be selling enough of them. And for with respect to your Apple, you need to keep 20,000 in your stock. So those inventory management can happen using ML. For customer, which I think you guys are really familiar with, is like lot of fraud happens with respect to coupon. So a single coupon is being used, or a lot of things happen over there. So those fraud detection can be taken care by ML. Chatbot is really common nowadays. Whenever you open Zomato, you can see that there is a chatbot which tries to solve your problem, or even the Alexa is a kind of a chatbot only, so you can talk to it. Then IVR responses can be automated using ML. Pricing, I discussed about payments. So similar to payments, we have pricing also. Sometimes what happens is by mistake someone has uploaded a wrong pricing, and what happens is that it's getting sold at a quite a frequent rate, and we have sold a lot of units, and we know that this is a false order, and like we have to pay out, since it's a obligation for me to send the item to the customer at my loss. It's better to identify the problem with respect to pricing at an early stage and resolve the problem, as compared to going back and just trying to send the customers coupons or sort of thing, or sorry later and everything. So it's kind of damaging to the industry as well. So that's why pricing anomaly, checking the pricing anomaly is really important. So we do it using autoencoder, which I will be speaking about at a later part. So we use autoencoder over here to identify the pricing problem. Then profit maximizing using pricing. So we can also do like a ML sort of thing. So you know about goal programming, in case you might have heard. So you can use goal programming, sort of those sort of thing, or decision tree sort of thing. So for maximizing your pricing based upon the profit. We in the BI and DevOps team, so we face problems with respect to cron failure. So certain times, like we have to maintain the database, we have to maintain the whole model and everything. So just like machines, like you have machine problems with the machine. So what happens is like your machine is running really slow and you don't know. So your whole reporting, your whole algorithm will fail if you are not running it properly. So database management and cron failure, we have to identify at like at a certain time. So we record the time and how much time it is taking to run individual cron or individual query sort of thing. So in that way, we can try to optimize the whole thing. So this is with respect to e-commerce. Now I will be talking about what is happening with respect to other industries. Okay, manufacturing. For example, we are having certain motors. So motors are running at a certain RPM, and there are certain vibrations with respect to those motors. So if we can trace, so every machine is having their lifetime, and sometimes what happens is it breaks down before lifetime also. Like the predicted lifetime is 5 years, but the machine broke down at 3 years, and that item is not in stock, and you have to get it delivered from some other country. It will take a lot of cost. They won't deliver one item. Those sort of problems might happen. So predicting the machine failure is one of the important aspect of ML in manufacturing industry. So what we have is like we can predict, we can see that how the machine has been performing in last so many days, and if there is certain anomaly, we will tell the management, okay, there is an anomaly in this case, we need to order this machine. So they will place the order for that machine. It will take some 1 month to deliver, and you will be able to replace the machine before it fails. So in that case, you are fail proof, like fail proofing your system. Disaster management, you can forecast the weather. Like currently, recently we have this Amphan storm. So if we had lot of data with respect to the weather of that area, we could have predicted that this is going to be super cyclone. We were able to only identify it as a super cyclone only after 18 hours of it being developed. So it transitions from a normal cyclone to a super cyclone within 18 hours. So if we had enough data about the temperature of that area, the weather conditions of that area, so we could have predicted that this can this can escalate to a super cyclone within 18 hours, and we need to start working on this. So that way we could have saved more lives, sort of things with respect to disaster management. So coming to healthcare, a lot of research is being going on with respect to COVID-19 vaccine. So COVID-19 vaccine is really hot area. Even what NVIDIA, which is a graphics manufacturing company, so they produce graphics card, they started asking their consumers to provide idle graphics card to certain what do you say, organizations like who are working on COVID vaccine right now. Then you can decide the containment zone instead of making the whole what you say district as a containment zone. You can identify using the movement of people, the COVID-19 people, and you can just identify how people are doing those sort of things. So that is one area where ML is really working hard at this moment. Then you have oil and natural gas exploration. So by examining the soil data as well as all the what you say features of that geography, you can identify how the what you say whether you will be able to find a gas reserve or not, whether it is profitable to go for a search in that area or not. Stock exchange is quite common, like predicting stock values is quite common nowadays. So ML is working really hard over there. Another key area where ML is working, the ML is being really utilized is the use of OTT, like whatever Hotstar or anywhere. So what they do, they deliver the quality of the product in suppose 720p. but you will be able to see the output in 4K. That's called image upscaling. So you can upscale the image from 720p to 4K. So a lot of research is going on in this area of image upscaling. So how this is going to affect? Earlier, you need to transport data at 4K speed only. So a 4K video might be consuming around 100 Mbps per second. So instead of that, right now, if you need to send only 720p data, you need to only consume 20 Mbps. So it is a cost saving, as well as you can deliver better content with very less bandwidth. So that is how it is working on. Transportations, as you know, say self-driving cars. So based on image processing, you can identify whether we are having barriers or whether we are having a person crossing in front of us. So those things we can identify. Then we have safer railway networks. Those sort of things can work on based on image processing in railways also. How it can impact agriculture, if we can identify how much rainfall has happened, how whether there is a canal going nearby that area, or like how much money has been spent by government with respect to loan or all these things to farmers and everything. We can identify how the what you say crop output will be there, and we can allocate resources like cold storage facilities to do those certain specific what you say areas itself. So we can provide transportation. I can provide 1,000 trucks to one area and 200 trucks to another area based upon the crop production. Instead of like I can plan it beforehand itself, right? And one more that is a controversial topic is politics. Politics, you might have heard about the Cambridge Analytica, where this Trump issues and all these things. So they did a targeted political campaign based upon MLA itself. So that is one. Right. Now we have talked about various applications of AML. So now we are going to see how, like, what are the different types of ML and what are the algorithms being used, right? So first we will talk about different types of machine learning algorithm. First one is the supervised learning. So in supervised learning, we provide a labeled data. So we have the training data and we have the test data. So these two data sets are there. And it's like sitting in a classroom, your teacher comes to you and he tells you, okay, we want to read this chapter, and we can just read the chapter, and then he tells me to solve the question. So that is how this thing works. Then we have the unsupervised learning. In unsupervised learning, it's like watching a Spanish movie on your television with a subtitle, and you learn, okay, hola means hello. Those sort of things, that's how the unsupervised learning works. And reinforced learning, the video I showed you is with respect to reinforced learning. It's based upon the feedback mechanism, and there is a total environment to this, and it reacts how the environment is working, right? That is there. Now, broadly, these algorithms can be classified into regression and classifications, right? Most of your algorithm will be falling into classification, because only few of them is, if we go back to this, what you say, e-commerce data, we can see that sales prediction, investor report, then product ranking, maybe, or one or two of them is with respect to regression, where we predict how the future will be, how much of this product, how much sales will be there, those sort of things. But other than that, most of these category of what you say algorithms are falling under classifications, right? So that's how the classification. So it's like classification is like putting up a clear boundary between product A and product B, and when and regression is better to continuous value problem, where you need to product how the data will be looking like in future, for example forecasting. We talked about training and test data. Normally we divide it into 17 to 30 ratio or 18 to 20 ratio. So these are being done by the if you are working on what you say, if you can see my screen, this is an MLR sort of algorithm. So if you are using these methods libraries, so you don't have to work on this. You only need to identify the data set, and it will automatically work on those training and test data, right? So we will right now talk about the regression models. Regression model is like a line of best fit. So it's like a line fitting model where you try to fit the line over there. with respect to the provided data set. It is really basic model, like it's the equation of a line defines how this model is being fitted, right? And then we have the cost function. So this is the mean square error. So we try to identify the distance between this and what do you say, individual points like data points. So we try to calculate and try to reduce the error over there, right? So that's how the cost function. And one more important parameter is R square. So R square is the goodness of fit, which is like a predicted value versus actual variance. So we calculate the variance of this data point and we calculate the predicted variance. So we take the test data and we take the actual data. So if it will be a maximum of 1 and the minimum of 0. So if it is close to 1, for MLR, the value is not close to 1. It tends to be 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 sort of thing. So the better the more closer it is to 1, the better the result. So R square is like you are having test data, you have predicted, okay, my data will be this, but your actual test data shows my variance is this. So that is how this is calculated, right? So this is how the like iteration works. So initially it predicts a line over here, then in the second iteration it goes up, 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 and once it finds that the error cannot be decreased without increasing the R square, it stops. So that is how it works, right? MLR is multiple linear regression. So this regression works with basis of only two data points. So we have the output Y and the input. This is the dependent variable. This is the independent variable. So if we are having only two data points, it will work. But when we are having multiple data points, for example, if we want to predict how tomorrow weather will be, so we will have to calculate what was the weather of today, how much humidity we are having, whether we are having rainfall or not, when the sun rose, those sort of things. So we have multiple data points with respect to that. So in this case, this is a single lines, this is a linear equation, but in this case, it will be a multiple linear equation. We will be having a linear hyperplane. So this will be shown by a hyperplane. So that is how this will be. And then we have the logistic regression. In our organization, we use MLR because this is the one that fits our model really good. Logistic regression we are not using in our organization, but how logistic regression work is like we instead of this equation, we have the sigmoid equation. So sigmoid equation is given by 1y 1 plus e to the power minus x. So what it does is whatever x value you provide, the y value output will be falling in on this line. This value will fall within the range of 0 to 1. So I can say that if my value, some verified provide a threshold, right? Suppose I am putting up a threshold of 0.5. So if any value is less than this, I can classify it as a not good and identify as this one as a good. So let's take the example of rain and whether it's going to rain or not going to rain. So I put up all the data points over here in the sigmoid function. We have a binary cross entropy loss function, which is out of course for this webinar, but if you guys join later, we can provide that also. So what it does is it provides an output in this shape. So we can say, okay, if the data is falling within this point, I will say that it is not going to work, and if it is not going to rain, and if it falls in this data point range, so I'm going to say that okay, it is going to rain. That's how the whole logistic regression works. It is for the binary classification. We also have what you say a softmax class regressions. In softmax, instead of this binary, we can divide this 0 to 1 into 3 parts, 4 parts, or this one. So we have a classification. We can provide a categorical value over there. So the loss function over there will be categorical cross entropy, right? So we will take a 1 minute break. So I'll just drink water till that time. Okay, coming back. Now coming to the classification problem. So in my previous examples, whatever I've shown that for example, product mapping or content score, I need to identify that these are falling into a certain category or certain, like for product mapping, I cannot do it using regression. So I have to use kind of classification model over there. So I should be able to distinguish between two products on the basis of whatever the data has been provided. That's where the classical classification models comes into picture, right? The easiest classification model is KNN. Uh, Mostly we don't use it because the limitations are really high in e-commerce. So what it does is like suppose K is the K nearest neighbor algorithm. So K is the number of nearest neighbor you want to count. So if star is our data point and identify whether this star is black or green. So I will say that it is. I will encircle the closest three of the other data points. So I will say, okay, this is closest, and then I will calculate the distance. So if I see that, okay, this is closest to this product, I'll say that this is falling into black, right? That's how this thing works. So there are different kind of equilibrium distance. So one of them is Manhattan, Minkowski, another sort of distance are there. So you can read about them or may be somewhere else. So there are different kind of distance calculation that happens. The advantages of using KNN algorithm is like it's really easy to use, but the disadvantage is like we have to load the data set. So when I have to check another data point and I load the data set, I have to include this whole data set again and then test it. So it works for 1,000, 2,000 sets of data, or maybe up to like 20,000 sets of data. But when we increase the data points, loading and checking for individual data points, it will compute data with respect to every data set. So we cannot use transfer learning in this case. It becomes really complicated, and the computational time increases. So it is that the disadvantage of using this KNN algorithm is so higher. So we don't use it in what you say industry at this moment. Then we also have naive Bayes equation, like a classification model, which is also a very simple sort of classification model where we are being a present. For example, we are being presented with a fruit, and I've been blinded, so they have used up a blindfold on my eyes, and they asked me, I will provide you the color, shape, and size of the fruit, and you need to tell me which fruit is there. So suppose this is my test data set, and this is my not the output data set, and this is my training data set. I have seen, okay, apple is there, apple is having color green, so there might be repeating apple is yellow also, it is round, it is size is there. So what I will do, I will create a predictor frequency for this. So how apple is repeating with respect to red, yellow, green, or orange, right? So this thing works like I have calculated how many times apple is having red color, how many times apple is having yellow colors, how many apples are having green color. Then I will just aggregate these things. We will get the total value of this, and then we will have predictor class percentage. That is just simply the ratio of this what is it, apple red by total. So this will give me a predictor class percentage. I'll do it with respect to size and everything. Now this is my training data set, right? And we have got this weightages also. Now we will use the weightages over here. So this is being by using algorithms, you will be able to get the weightages over there also. And when you apply for our unknown fruit, so we have seen that for our unknown fruit, the color is red. The probability of it being apple is 40%. The probability of it being orange is 0%. The probability of it being strawberry is 60%, right? But the weightage is 2. So I will start calculating these values as well as with respect to shape. If it is round, so the probabilities are given. So finally, I will decide, okay, I will calculate this into this. So, and this into the weightage, 65% into 0.2. So I will create a value of 4.6. Similarly, I will calculate for orange. So I'll get different class percentage, and we will be able to identify the likelihood of that class, right? So I will say, okay, the likelihood of that class is 4.16 with respect to apple. So I will say my it is like the unknown fruit is apple. So this is really basic sort of algorithm. These are not being mostly used in industries because of the naive nature of this algorithm. Then we have the decision tree. These are being used in industry, but since with the discovery of what you say artificial neural networks and it being more efficient, we don't use decision tree much often. How decision tree works is like it's yes no sort of thing. So it's really easy how you want to, like if you want to buy a house itself. In this case, we see that we will first of all identify how many family members are there. If we are having 3 family members, we will say that okay, yes. Then we will ask the question: is it like, are you married or not? If you say yes, we will suggest you 3 BHK, those sort of things. So let's this is the decision tree. So let's come and see how it will work in with respect to algorithm. Now suppose we are suppose some person is going to play tennis on certain days. So we are going to have a sunny day over there, overcast or rain. So there are different sort of things. It can be like there can be humidity, wind also, and how the whole weather is there. So we will say that out of 22 days, the person has played only on 13 occasions, and on 9 occasions he did not play. So we will try to then split it among whether how was the outlook. So if was it sunny, was it overcast, was it raining. So we can see that okay, he has played on 4 days and he did not play on one day. Then on sunny days he did not play on 6 days, and he played on 6 days. So we'll then further segregate it to this one. We will try to reduce into a certain pattern. Suppose in this case, if I had played for 5 days, I did not play for like I did not play any of the day, then what we will do is we will say it as a pure sort of segregation, pure segregation. I was able to segregate it properly between play and don't play. So we will try to reach to the end. So this is our root node, this is our leaf node, this is the intermediate node, and we will in the leaf node we will try to reach to a level of purity, right? So in that case, so we should have in this case it should have been play for 5 days and don't play for 0 days, or in this case it would have been suppose don't play for 5 days and play for 0 days. So in that case we would have reached purity. So we'll try to drill down till the point it reaches purity. So that's how it works. The biggest disadvantage of using decision tree is like it is not accurate, right? So whenever you are using decision tree, since it works on yes no sort of thing and not the what you say calculated weightages, so it does not work as expected. A method to improve the results is random forest. What we do in random forest, we take out data set. So this might be having certain data set. From that data set, we take out individual features, right, and create individual features for this, right. It works on the basis of majority voting. So suppose I sit and like we are having a committee meeting, and I know the result should be yes, right? And the second person will say no, and there will be total 9 yes and 2 no's, right? So I will say the product is good. My features are totally different as compared to the other person, but we are belonging to the same community. Suppose I live in a certain society and we are having the same problem, right? But my viewpoints are totally different and his viewpoints are totally different because he is seeing the data from a different perspective, and I'm seeing the data from a different perspective. If I was supposed to take the decision, I could have taken the decision of yes, or maybe in this case no. So I would have been totally wrong. What I will do is I will use the herd mentality. So I will be having the other person saying no, the other person is saying no, and rest of the 9 persons are saying say yes. So I will take out that majority has voted me yes. So my features are there. We are living in the same community, and we are taking the data individual features from that community. So that's how the random forest works. Next, coming to support vector machines. Support vector machines is a very precise tool. It does not work on a large data set, so you have to be very careful when using it with respect to support vector machines, right? And in support vector machine is like creation of hyperplane. We saw with respect to what you say regression, that we are creating certain sort of line. So in this case we are creating line, but in support vector we create a what you say hyperspace, hyperplane. We create a hyperplane. So it helps us in a different aspect also. In that case, if we are having a linearly segregable data, so we will be able to identify the data point. This works in case of 2D and 3D also. In case of 3D dimensions, so we will be having data points over here. So I will create a hyperplane over here, and these are my support vectors. I will try to minimize the distance. The first priority will be to maximize the what you say gain. So I will try to first see that okay, my this data should be segregable. Okay, that is the segregation first, and then margin second. So my distance margin should reduce. So that's how this example shows that this is not my correct data because not my correct hyperplane. L1 is not the correct hyperplane because it is not able to segregate the data. Whereas L2 is able to segregate the data and the distance is also really less. Whereas compared to L3, I am able to segregate the data, but the distance is quite high. So I will say, okay, my this point is not working for like this hyperplane is suitable, my suitable hyperplane. When it comes to 3D data, now imagine you are viewing it as a 2D point. You won't be able to draw a line over here and see, okay, my data is crossing. You need to draw a plane. So how support vector machine works is like they have a kernel trick over there. What it does, it increases the data point into a 3D plane, and then it tries to what you say draw a hyperplane over there. So that is called the decision surface. So anything above this is coming to a one classification, and anything below this is coming to another classification. But remember, this has to be done for a very smaller data set. It's a really precise tool, but it cannot be used on a large data set. But since most of the companies, organizations are doing like working on large data set, SVM does not work that often. Like they don't work that well, right? Now we will talk about neural networks, and then further we will deep dive into deep neural networks. So if we see the structure of our neurons, so we have the dendrites over here, and then we have this cell over here, then we have the myelin sheaths, and then we have the axon terminals. So X1s are the input. So we provide input. So whatever we see from our eyes, provide as an input to this dendrites. Then our cell processes the information and we activate each of these individual sheets, right? So each of these individual sheets are activated, and then we get the output. Okay, this is having this much output. So we will be able to identify um, green as green and red as red. So that's how this is working. So whenever we are getting input from our eyes, and then it has activated that okay, this color is red, so this Y2 will be activated. The activation for Y1 will be so low that it will be ignored. So we will say okay, the output is red color. So similarly, neural network works. So we have the input layer. We provide individual weightages over here, and these are being what you say activated by a sigma, like a sigmoid or tanh function, right? So those things happen over here. So that is called the activation function. So from node 1 to node 2, there will be the weightages and individual activation functions. So if we are having some 30 neurons over here, so we will be having a like a 32C2 sort of in combination sort of thing. So we will have large level network of weightages as well as activations. Right? So key terms with respect to neural networks. First one is the feed-forward neural network. So what happens in a feed-forward neural network is we start from input layer and go towards the output layer, and then we have the back propagation. What happens now when going from this one, I will randomly allocate the weightages over there and provide the sigmoid function. It will start calculating the loss function over here, right? And this loss function will be calculated. But while back propagating, in the case of back propagating, it will start decreasing the loss function. So we will be exploring it in a like in the next slide itself how this thing works. So based upon the loss function, it will start decreasing the values, and that's it. We use optimization function for those. So we have the gradient descent, ADAM, adaptive gradient algorithm, that is the ADGRAD, and then RMS prop is there. So these kind of optimization functions are there. So what is the gradient descent? So suppose this is my loss function, right? And I start at this point. So slowly I will start decreasing with respect to this point to reach the minimum loss. But what happens with respect to loss function is that we might have a local minima, local maxima also. So in this case, we are having the local maxima, and over here we have the local minima. So this thing comes on a halt over there, and that's where this kind of other algorithm, like this is the stochastic gradient descent, or stochastic gradient descent with momentum and other sort of algorithms comes into play. So what it does is like it computes the whole data. Currently this data is in 2D. It computes the whole data in 3D perspective. Also it tries to avoid this local maxima, local minima problem. And also you can see that some of them, like this ADA delta, is really fast. That is this is really fast, and it is able to predict the loss functions really fast. So that's how this whole thing works. So while backpropagating, I am able to calculate the loss function and achieve more accuracy, right? And then we have the what is the activation function. There are total there are more than 7-8 loss functions are there. I have listed out 5 only. For, the most used are sigmoid and ReLU, right? You can and tanh also. So in sigmoid, we have already seen the sigmoid function in our logistic linear regression, that it is being shown by this formula. So what it will do is that it will fall between 0 to 1 value. In similar manner, we have the what you say tanh function, that is the hyperbolic tangent function. It is being provided by 1 plus e to power minus x divided by 1 plus e to power minus x, sorry, plus x and minus x. Though that formula it is being provided. So what it does is like it provides a value between -1 and 1. That's the tanh function. ReLU function is rectified linear unit. So this is being mostly being used. We use leaky ReLU also. So what happens is like you either have a value below 0. So it will be 0. Whatever value is 0 is given by max of 0 or this value. And in case of leaky 0, we will have like a minor what is a multiplier of 0, that value, if it falls within this value, right? So if it is falling below 0, so we will have a multiplier of 0.1. So that's how the leaky ReLU is being done. Softmax is being used for what you say uh, categorical classification, like what we did we saw in logistic regression. We had the binary classification, we have categorical classification with respect to softmax. Okay. Now let's come back to deep learning algorithms. In case of like we have seen in normal neural networks, we have one hidden layer and one input and output layer. Now if we start adding hidden layer over here, right, so my whole process will become deep neural network. So the what it does is like it improves the accuracy of the whole model. So that's how this deep neural network works. It's like we provide different input. We have the input layer and we have the hidden layer. So we will try to include more and more hidden layer, so that it improves the accuracy of the output layer. So this is all about the deep neural network. So that's called the artificial neural network also. We also have the autoencoders. Autoencoders are mostly being used with respect to anomaly detection, like we had in pricing data set. So whenever we face problem with respect to pricing, my prices has gone down suddenly, I will say that there is anomaly in my pricing. What it does is like we have input, the first part of certain. So what it does is like this hidden layer 1 will be having suppose 32 nodes. Then the second hidden layer will be having 20 nodes. Third hidden layer will be having 8 nodes, and last hidden layer will be having 4 nodes. So what it will do is like it will start decreasing. So my encoding will start working. And in the last layer, after which I won't be able to extract any data. So that is called the bottleneck layer, or you can call it the latent layer, right? So that is called the latent layer. So this minimum layer is required for me to decode the same image from initial image. Suppose I have initially provided an initial original output as this, right? 4 handwritten output. I will start encoding and start encoding till I reach this Z layer, right? And on Z layer, I will start decoding again using the sigmoid or whatever the activation function. So I will start decoding it, and I will reach up to a certain output. I'll see that okay, my output is almost similar to this one. However, this is not lossless, so it won't work 100%. Since we are having a loss of data over here, so it won't be able to reproduce exactly the same data, but it will be able to reproduce the same data. So how this helps? First of all, if I am able to reproduce my, suppose with respect to pricing, if I am able to reproduce my same prices for the product over here, right? So I will say that okay, my data is working, like my my pricing model is working at this moment. But if we see that there is a deviation, instead of 4, we are getting 5 over here, we will say that okay, no, my pricing is totally like it's not working, it's void for that product, right? So we will be able to identify. Similarly, if we have trained the data on the basis of this data point, and we are having a noise data, suppose for example, if we are having a lot of noises over here, and we provide this as a input data, then what happens is like it will be able to reproduce the same data without this noise. So it is able to generate the output without having this noise. So hello, hello. Yeah. So we will be able to reproduce this output without this noise. So that's how the autoencoder works. It's not widely used, but it works really well with respect to anomaly detection. One more thing, we can improve this output artificial neural network by deleting some of the neurons in different epochs. Epochs are the number of runs. So in the first epoch, we will do one forward propagation and one backward propagation. In the second epoch, we will again do a backward propagation, but this time I will delete this one of the neurons. So what it will do is that it will try to train individual neurons to work independently of these neurons. So that's how it works in ANN. So you try to make the data more accurate by deleting some of the neurons in each epoch. And coming to CNN, that is the convoluted neural network. So this is it is highly being used in industry right now. One of the most used neural networks. So what it like with respect to image processing, text mining, and everything sort of thing, we use CNN. So this is a highly used neural network at this moment in the industry. So how it works is that we have an input image, right? What we do is like we take out a certain part of this image, right? We take out certain part of this image, and then we apply a filter. So there is a filter. Suppose we have a image of 32 bits by 32 bits, and we have a filter map. So that is called the kernel also of 16 by 16. So we try to map it on that, and it is called the feature map. So that's how the convolution layer works. It maps the data point right into a feature map. So initially I was having a very large data set, and it is we map using the filter, and we get a different data set over here. So we have reduced the dimension over there in the convolution method. So that feature map works, and then we have the pooling layer. So pooling layer works as a additional layer reduction sort of thing. So this is the actual layer reduction. What is in pooling layer? What we do in pooling layer is like we have a pooling function. So in most of the cases we have the max function, and we take our, suppose we can use this much window, right? So give me a minute. Suppose we are having this much window, right? And from this window I take out the data points, and I try to take out the max value over here, and I will try to project it over here. So what it will do is like instead of showing me this much data, I will be able to pull it by using the max value. So I will be able to do a reduction of the data itself without having a loss of enough data. What we were facing in autoencoder is we were having a loss of data, but in CNN we won't be having enough loss of data. So that's how this pooling layer works. We will add more layers to this. So in the pooling layer, again we will apply the same filter, and then it will create this what you say convolutional layer, and then we will take out windows, we will do another window, we will take windows and create the what is a pooling layer, right? And then we will have a final fully connected layer over here. Fully connected layer is exactly a neural network sort of layer. It will be a complete layer. The only thing is like my final output of the convolution, right? This pooling layer will act as a input to this fully connected layer. So the input over here will be the convolutional network, right? And then we will be able to predict the class of the product. That's how this whole prediction will work. Uh, So coming back to there are different kind of other learning models also. We covered only three. There are other learning models also. Uh, the recurrent neural network is one of the most important one among these. We also have the generative adversarial network. So let's talk about the recurrent neural network briefly. So what it does is like uh, individual what you say layers provide a feedback sort of thing to this layer, previous layer. So it provides a feedback to itself, and then it works in a certain manner, and then there will be gates and everything, so it provides the data. So mostly RNN works what you say um, on the basis of when you have a sequential data, suppose with respect to speech or natural language processing, I will ask Alexa what is the time. So what it does is like it segregates what is the time. So what is his first node? What goes into the first node is goes to the second node. Uh, the time is goes to the third node, and so on. So what it does is like it takes the input node of what and provides a what you say information to the second node. So the uh, output of what goes here as an input to is. So in that way, your whole recurrent neural network works. So LSTM and GRU, that is a kind of a RNN only. They're modified RNN. The biggest problem with RNN is that it has short-term memory. So since you provide data just like what is the time now, so what is appearing like almost like 3 steps before now, right? So the output will be really minimized with respect to the input of what is really minimized. That is called the memory loss, short-term memory loss. Sorry, short-term memory of RNN. So the what you say, what is not exactly providing an input. So your system, so your algorithm will say that the person is asking is now. It will ignore what time is now. So it will ignore the what time. So that's it been solved by LSTM and GRU. There are other models like Hopfield model, deep belief network, deep convolutional network, and Boltzmann machine Markov chain sort of thing, which you can find it on internet also. One of the latest model which are being used for creating fake images and everything is being the GAN. It was released some 2-3 years back. So this is being widely used at this moment. Right? So before going to the Q&A session, we will talk about few additional concepts with respect to what you say ML and the algorithm. So first one is the error versus accuracy. We try to reduce the things to be kept in mind is that we try to reduce the error, and we try to increase the accuracy. So different models have different way of calculating the error and accuracy that like that can be taken care of by the algorithm itself. So we do not have to worry like in if you are working on Python, so if you use TensorFlow, they will provide you the output in that manner itself, right? Another two of the most important problems that occur in machine learning is overfitting and underfitting. What happens in underfitting is like you have this data set, and if I draw a straight line, it will not fit. So I am not able to linearly like draw the output over here. So if I say that okay, my what will be the value at this point of time, instead of showing me this value, it will show me this value, right? So I will say that it is underfitting, so it is not working properly. Then we have the correct, that is the good fit, and we have the overfit. So in overfit, eh, you draw a line exactly to the data point. So like it takes a lot of epoch, like you do it after a certain time. See, in this case, we are able to predict the data quite accurately, but in this case, we are overachieving the data, and that is not a good model, right? And we will be using a lot of computational time as well as computational, what you say, power to achieve this. So that is not a good habit. So we will try to reduce the overfitting sort of thing. A way to see is using loss and validation loss. So I told you that in machine learning, like we have training data and test data. We also have the validation data in the training data itself. So what it does is like it takes a certain portion of the training data and validates the result. So on the basis of the validation data, we see that suppose in this case we are having a loss function. It goes like this, and our validation data is like this. And in certain cases, suppose this is my validation loss and it is above this line, right? What will I will say that even after 10 epoch, my validation, my total loss is not reducing, and my validation loss is higher. So I should stop at 10 epoch only. So that's how this works, like a underfitting and overfitting sort of thing. And in this case, I am trying to increase my validation loss is also increasing, so I can improve the data, I can increase the accuracy of the data. This is my last topic, term frequency and independent document frequency. This is not related to machine learning, but somehow related to what you say, text mining. So what happens, like this works with respect to search engine, like search, whenever you search an item or text classifications, or with respect to what you say, uh, you want to build up a method where you will be able to predict the output of whatever text you are typing. For example, Google nowadays have like when you type on Gmail, you will be able to see that it is predicting whatever you are typing. So TF-IDF works like it works on the TF-IDF model itself most of the time. What happens in TF-IDF? Suppose you have a data frame of suppose 100 items, 100 rows, and out of those 20 rows is having is containing the keyword apple, right? So what it does, the term frequency. So I will, if I'm searching for apple, so wherever the keyword apple is appearing, right? It will identify it as one, and wherever it is not appearing, is it will identify it as zero. So we are having the term frequency as one or zero. So that's the term frequency. But when we have a complex data point, suppose Apple iPhone cover, right? I'm searching for Apple iPhone cover. What happens in that case? We have Apple product also. We have a cover also of different from Apple also, or different categories also. And I have a vendor who has manually inserted what you say, uh, I will say cover, and some other term, right? So he has inserted cover for iPhone, cover for Samsung. So cover is repeating a lot of time. So now my Apple iPhone is my keyword which I have to focus on and not on the cover. How I can deal with that? It is being dealt by inverse document frequency. So I will check for those 100 results, how many times these individual keywords are appearing. So Apple is appearing 20 times, iPhone is appearing only 5 times, whereas cover is appearing suppose 500 times. So my weightages to cover will be really low as compared to Apple and my iPhone. So my highest weightage will be with respect to iPhone, then to Apple, and then to cover. So that is the inverse document frequency. So how many times it is appearing in that document. And term frequency, so Apple is appearing 20 times, iPhone is appearing 5 times. So I will multiply those weightages and find out a value. So that's how the concept of search engine works with respect to we have the internal search and everything, so it works on TF-IDF model, right? So Q&A finally. Ravi, you there? Hello? 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 Okay. I think Ravi is not there, so I will go through individual queries at this moment. So, research trends in e-commerce by using machine learning. So research trends like, see, when it comes to e-commerce, e-commerce is a really recent industry, right? Machine learning in like with respect to Amazon, even Amazon don't have a lot of things like recommendation engines are working over there. It is having quite a good infrastructure. Still, does not use a lot of machine learning algorithms over there. Other than recommendation engine, with respect to pricing, we started using it. So research trend, I will say that. You will get lot of data points with respect to e-commerce and with respect to recommendation and how we can start improving the recommendation engine itself. A lot of people use searches, internal searches show a lot of random results. If you go and search for in Flipkart laptop and then some 8 GB laptop, so those results don't show properly in that case, so you can try and improve that one over there. So lot of research can go. So if you are using uh, what you say current algorithm, suppose someone is using GAN algorithm or using recurrent neural recurrent algorithm, so those sort of things can be improved. So I'm not really clear about the question you are asking, whether it is research with respect to industry point of view or research with respect to uh, as a professor or as a lecturer or as a student from your point of view, right? We can provide some easy to learn resources from where we can learn ML. Okay, as I told you that you can follow Medium, so towards data science is one of them. So you can go to towards data science. You can like search over of different kind of. So they provide like how you can use pandas and everything sort of thing. So these visualization tools are there. You can just search over here whatever you want to learn topic. Suppose I want to learn about linear regression, right? So if you search for linear regression, it will show you different results using Python. If you want to learn it in Python, so you just type for Python and it will show you results over there. So linear regression Python implementation is really easy tool. You can use you what you say books. You can buy books also with respect to Python and everything. So it becomes really easy. If you don't have a powerful laptop to learn all these things, you can use Google Colab. You can write down all your code in Google Colab. It's totally free, so you can just create a new notebook over here. It will provide you the what you say whatever resources are there. Even if you are having a very low powered laptop or computer, you can start working over here in Google Colab, and you can just create your own project. There are certain limitations to this. They even provide you what you say. You can change the runtime, right? So you can also select a GPU and TPU. So if you are able, you want to do certain kind of algorithm, like a deep neural network sort of algorithm, which takes lot of resources, you can select over here. So it's absolutely free. You can try those. And I will say, in case you want to learn through different guides, so you can use through this towards data science or download some books or something. PPT will be shared with you guys soon. Discuss about kernel in learning. Uh, Wait a minute. So kernel, basically kernel is I was talking about kernel with respect to support vectors, right? So in support with respect to neural network, we don't use kernel like filter sort of thing. So over here we have used filter. That is a kind of a kernel. So we have sort of a data points instead of weightages. We have a data point sort of thing. So suppose it's kind of a projection. So you are having a bigger window, right? And you are having a smaller window. That kernel itself is like how you view the output of that bigger window from that smaller window. So you try to project it on the smaller window, and that's how you create the feature map, right? So that's how the kernel is there. So filter is a kind of a kernel itself. Certificate will be shared later with you guys. You need to contact Ravi. Can you provide some easy to learn research? Thank you. What type of neural network algorithm? See, everything can be applied. So for example, like whatever example I gave you with respect to e-commerce, I'm working on a very specific part. I'm working with respect to boosting algorithm, the ranking algorithm. I don't work with respect to and I also work with respect to pricing or payments also, but I don't work with respect to tech, how tech is deploying the codes, like code suggestions or search, how it is working. So like there are different kind of neural networks. So in my case, more I am using autoencoder. So autoencoder is a kind of a artificial neural network only, which what do you say provides as an anomaly over there. So whenever my payment gateway failure happens, within some like half an hour, it will tell me that okay, my payment gateway failure has occurred, and I need to talk to the customer care of CC Avenue or whatever my payment gateway provider is there. So that they can fix the issue for with respect to my payment gateway. So that's how. In my case, I'm using regression. Other people are using other kind of convolutional neural network, like content team using CNN or RNN kind of thing. Your customer care team is using what you say RNN and LSTM sort of thing. So they are using totally different sort of model for you building their chatbot sort of thing. So different teams work in different like sync sort of work, and they try to work with different models. So there's not exactly a good fit for individual model. For me, autoencoder was really important because I cannot identify anomaly with respect to CNN or RNN. So for me, detecting an anomaly without providing a training data set. So with respect to autoencoder, you need not to provide the training data set. It automatically detects the anomaly. For me, that was a really important what is the algorithm. If I used some other algorithm, I would have like it would not have been helpful for me to use those algorithms because those are for example we are having what you say generative adversarial network. We as a e-commerce company is not going to use this one because we don't want to sell a fake product. So it depends upon how the requirement of individual team is there, right? Bioimage data. Like Akhilesh Kumar Singh. Can you just explain what do you mean by bioimage data? You mean to say with respect to scans and everything, ultrasound or all those things? If yes, if that is the question, yes. Uh, yeah, in over here in towards data science, you will also find that okay, iron can be used with respect to image classification and to find anomalies in with respect to ultrasound. So finding Down syndrome or with respect to how the medical records are there. So we can identify how the we can like identify with respect to medical problems of individual persons, right? So we can say, okay, we have taken the X-ray of that person. It does not matches the standard norm, and there is a problem over here. We have taken the X-ray of legs, and there is a problem with respect to knee joints. So it will be able to point out, okay, your image says that there is a problem over here. So instead of you being the output, you will just upload the output to the network. It will automatically see that, okay, my neural network, it compares with respect to past data and say that, okay, we have found a problem over here. So that's how it is going to work. Okay, binary accuracy. So entropy is created. See, accuracy is like how accurate you are with respect to. So you have training data and test data. So on training data, you have created the model, and now you are testing it on your test data. So if you are closer to your test data, you will say that your accuracy has risen. So there is a very. Give me 1 minute. So there is one chart. So in that chart, you can see that how many output of the test result as well as the predicted result. So in that chart, you will be able to see that, okay, this many output has occurred as out, like in my predicted data, these many outputs are matching the test data. So I will say that my accuracy has improved. So if I start predicting a lot of data output, so I will say that my prediction has improved. But cross entropy. So entropy, what is entropy? If you go back to thermodynamics, in thermodynamics, entropy is like something is misbalanced, so sort of thing. So you try to, entropy is kind of an error sort of thing. So you try to reduce that error. So that binary cross entropy works similar to that. So that is the whole point of binary cross entropy. So you try to increase the entropy of that one. So in case you want binary formula for binary cross entropy, I will be able to share it with you guys later. I will be adding it to the same slide, right? Because I have written it somewhere else, so I will have to get it from somewhere. Because in my organization we are not using logistic regression, so I have to not be able to tell you exact formula at this moment, but I will be able to share you the data in the slide. Okay, can you tell us what particular algorithm is preferable in a particular situation? I will again give my example itself. So in my case, I had to suppose in case of predicting the sales, we are running pre-Ramadan sale at this moment. So in pre-Ramadan sale, I cannot use classification model over there, right? So in pre-Ramadan sale, I have to use my own model, like I have to use regression model over here. So I will be using MLR. So to identify the sales over there. Again, with respect to my product ranking, based upon my past sales data, I need to rank the product. So in that case also, I'm using MLR by providing individual bit to individual categories and all these things. But when it comes to my anomalies sort of thing, I'm using autoencoder. When it comes to your image classification, you have to use CNN sort of thing, or other models are there, different models are there, right? People are not basically using K-fold or KNN or naive Bayes. They are good for basic understanding, but they're not being used in industry, or even support vector is not being used in the industry. Give me a minute. I think people are complaining that my screen is not visible. Could you please alert sorry, screen? You decide the value weights. So this value, initial value, see, when you use TensorFlow or PyTorch or any other libraries, right? The initial value is being allocated smartly by the system itself. So whenever you are using those libraries, people have done a lot of research over there, and they will be able to identify how much initial values has been given. As I told you, when doing a back propagation in case of neural network, when you go back, you try to reduce the error. So how you reduce the error is by decreasing this weightages. So if you have this weightages W1 over here, initial weightages W1, right? This one was having W2. you allocated this one as 1, now you allocate it as 0.75, right? And you check up how much error is there now when going back. Now when I'm going back, I'm what is it, back propagating. Now I will check how much error is there, and if my error is going down, I will say I will set it at 0.5, right? And again, I will do it for this also, sort of thing. Then in the next epoch, I will try to further reduce value of these weightages, and then I will set it as 0.6, right? And then again, so the weightage is being calculated by the algorithm itself uh, at the end of the day. So actual, see how artificial neural network works is like assigning the right weightages to the right node. The whole concept of artificial neural network is assigning of weightages. Your activation function, whether it is tanh or sigmoid function, whether it is tanh or sigmoid function, they only act as a activation, whether my this layer will be activated or this layer will be activated. But this weightages is the actual thing that is working as the optimization. So the I talked about the optimizer, what you say, function. So optimizer function, when you backpropagate, it uses either, we mostly use Adam as our optimizer function. So when you backpropagate, it uses Adam to optimize the whole thing. So it's like curve fitting sort of thing. So you initially when you provided weight as W1, it was not fitting the curve. It was going like this. Now you start propagating. So we are using gradient descent sort of thing or Adam sort of thing. So it will start reducing. So at W 1 is equals to 0.75, it will come down at this level, W at this thing. So that's how the curve fitting works. Okay, how machine unsupervised learning helps to research in COVID-19. So see, when you have lot of data, so what happens is like you are able to generate data points. So the age group is there. A person is symptomatic with respect to kidney failure or with respect to any other problem. So he might be having heart problem or sort of thing. So when you have now we are having around 50 lakhs data points, right? So we will be able to correctly accurate which persons are really susceptible to this COVID-19, right? Some of the people might be asymptomatic, and some of the people like they are having COVID-19, but they are like asymptomatic. So we will be able to identify, okay, they are uh, these are good people who are having what you say heart problem, but they are asymptomatic. So we will be able to identify the date, age sort of thing, and we will be able to predict, okay, uh, we will be able to say, okay, these people are really prone to coronavirus sort of thing. So that's how achieving the result from the what you say COVID data works, right? So you are having a lot of data, you build up a model on that, and you try to identify this one. So for single person, you have all the test records, which location he was working, which location he is living, how he is meeting the people, where he is going. So you will be able to like um, uh, what you say provide a containment zone for those. You will be able to provide better what you say vaccine facilities to those, or those sort of things. Even NVIDIA, as I told you, that NVIDIA has launched certain program where you can like if you are having a GPU on your card, so you can share your GPU with those research institutes also. So you just need to connect your computer to that. Like you need to download some what you say program files, run the program files, and it will automatically share your GPU with that research institute, so they can expand. Because see, GPU is really important part of machine learning, because GPU can do what you say uh, very fast parallel processing as compared to a CPU. So it can, with respect to data, it is like a graphical property only. Data points are equivalent to graphical properties. So GPUs are really helpful in those cases. Deep learning can be used. Deep learning for topic modeling. Topic modeling, yes. See, there are sentiment analysis, and like suppose you have written down uh, what you say a thesis, right? And you want to take out the keywords from those theses, the most important theses, and you want to people have done research with respect to abstract. So it will provide you an abstract. So even like if I search for abstract using, so there might be certain paper with respect to abstract using machine learning. So uh, it uses machine learning to read your whole what you say research paper and provide an abstract for that. And even the same you can do it for topic also. So but see, with respect to topics, like the keywords will be really limited and those things. So I am not sure, but for abstract people have done this thing. Yes, SVM is a part of machine learning only, right? So but the thing is like it is really the data point to which it can be applied is really small, so you cannot use it for a large data set. Like in the industries, we use a big data sort of thing. My daily data points are above 50 million, so I pull 50 millions of data sets each day sort of thing. I cannot use support vector machines on those things, so industry does not use it. And see, support vector machines, the job of support vector machine is being done by artificial neural network. The filter over there, like CNN, in CNN, filter is a kind of a kernel. In support vector, we saw that we in support vector machine we saw that we are using a kernel. Okay, so we are using a hyperplane. In this case, we used a kernel. So sort of thing like it is providing like we modified the whole data point, and like we are able to use a hyperplane over there. In case of neural network, individual layer creates an individual non-linear hyperplane. Sorry, linear hyperplane. So it creates a linear hyperplane, and by combining these hidden layers, we create a non-linear hyperplane. So by individual linear hyperplane, we modify the result to achieve a non-linear hyperplane. So the main argument that we can use in e-commerce. See, all the algorithms can be used except for I showed this one. Like we are not using this last one, generative network. So Markov chain and Boltzmann chain, I cannot tell you out more of these things. RNN we are using with respect to chatbot. These things work somewhere. I'm not sure about the industry, like where we can use it. We have to do some research on that. But we are using RNN, and then autoencoder like CNN. We are using with respect to image processing, autoencoders. I'm using myself, and this is the basic artificial neural network. Which even if you are not using this one, you can use that one like for basic projects and all, everything. See, these are really uh, with respect to specific like whenever you are using these kind of methods, right, you are trying to solve a particular problem which cannot be solved by other models. So different kind of problems can be solved by different kind of models. So maybe with respect to code what you say code completion, they might be using some other model like a deep convolutional network sort of thing. For identifying how product bundling will be done, we can use Markov chain sort of thing. So different kind of algorithm works in e-commerce. Whenever I get recording of this session, so Ravi will share with you the recording. Yes, okay, sir, please share PPT and the certificate. Certificate will be shared with by 10 July, and Ravi is the contact person, right? Say 120 images, data set train is performed before augmentation or test split. See, 120 data set. There is a method to how you can increase the images. So, if you suppose you are doing a training of this thing, so this is being done in lot of industry, right? So, if you have very few data sets, suppose thousands, what you do image transformation. In image transformation, you rotate the images by certain angles, right? Suppose I have a cat image, I'll rotate it by 90 degree, then 180 degree, 240 degree, 300 degree, and then instead of having 120 images, now I will be having total into 4 images. So I will be having something around 480 images. Now I will provide noise over there manually. I will provide what you say, stretch the whole images. I will cut the images. I will slice the images. So these are the tips and tricks being used in industries to, if they have very small data set with respect to images, they use this kind of tips and tricks to uh, generate more data set, right? So you can just rotate the image and you can just use that. You can stretch the image, you can change the pixel sizes. So these are the tips and tricks to create the variations of the same image, and how the neural network will think, okay, this is a different image taken in different directions. So that's how this thing works. So you can increase this 120 data set into 1000 data set by simply using some tips and tricks. 120 data set is really small. Like a very popular one is the petals, and this one. There is one very popular data set that is having very small data points. So even they are using the same trick. Once more, main learning algorithm. What can neural network offer in education? Education, like, see, in education, let me think of a solution. So, okay, let's imagine you are providing video lectures, right? And your voice is not that much audible at this moment. What you can do is you can use neural network to identify your language and convert it as a caption. So you are having a video over here. So you will be having a video running over here, and you can have captions over there. So it will be able to exactly identify what you are speaking about. So if you are using a formula over here, if you are a mathematics teacher and you're using a formula, so it will be able to identify what you're talking about and output as a result. So instead of using like what you say, using a blackboard sort of thing, you can use your own voice to record these values, right? That is that's how it will work. Education, now you can identify what child group you want to focus on. Now these are your weaker students, weaker strata of students. These are your students. So you can identify them, and you can provide them a totally different content, right? And you can provide totally different content to your stronger students. So those kind of things can be done. Identification or classification of your students, or classification of your content. Then you can also do summary of your whole, what you say, if you use artificial neural network, you can take out the summary of your whole chapter itself. Like, you don't have to write down summary on your own. So those kind of things will work in education. Prof, uh, Professor Raul, I did not get before augmentation or after augmentation thing. Can you write the complete question? So see, SVM, I told you that SVM is for the smaller data set. Neural network is like a expanded model sort of thing. So deep neural, if you are using deep neural network, your accuracy will increase. And uh, deep neural network, your limitations are really less. You use large data set also. So I will say that it's better to start with the like a neural network itself. For image classification, CNN, RNN is there. CNN is most widely used, right? Certificate will be like mailed to you guys by Ravi. Any certificate is any other your query but not replying it. Asu, okay, for smaller data set. So if you say, first of all, you have to, as I told you that training a test data set will be done before augmentation. It cannot be done after augmentation. So once you have done it, your test data set should always be separate from your training data set. Keep that in mind. You cannot use training data set or if after you have trained your data set in the test data set. Test data set has to be completely different. So you have to segregate it totally at the beginning itself. And Mr. Asu, sorry, I can't find your question. So which field belongs to core computer science? Which field, like yeah, this whole neural network, so the algorithm itself belongs to core computer science. I'm coming from a manufacturing background. I worked for 4 years in manufacturing. Like machine learning is something which anyone can learn. It's all based upon algorithm. It's purely algorithm based, so it's a part of a computer science only, right? But for cases like me, I worked in like before 3 years ago. I was not even coding, right? I didn't knew coding or anything. I started coding 3 years back. So I started learning data science and machine learning 3 years back. So it's not necessary with respect to you have to be from what you say coding background or computer science background. Computer science gives you additional advantages because you know a lot of tips and tricks in your hand. You know how sorting algorithm works. You know how things work. You know how to use programming languages. So those sort of things you will be able to sort out the solutions. But it's not a necessary parameter for people to learn it. Some experience from industry. Please tell me which example is totally based upon core computer science. Example of core computer science. Core computer science, like your operating system itself, lot of things in your operating system. So crash analytics. So suppose, or even with respect to virus detection. So how the virus detection? Like earlier, what we used to have is we used to have a virus, what is a data set, right? So whenever you are downloading a antivirus software, it will download 3-4 GB of virus data set. So it will tell it exactly, okay, this is matching. So it will use kind of VLOOKUP sort of thing in it, and it will say, okay, this is matching, so this is a virus sort of thing. Now, coming to computer science, so how you will use it with respect to machine learning. So you have trained the data set on the basis of this data set. Now you have trained it. Now you will implement it in your antivirus software. Now you don't have to download the whole import, right? You don't have to download the whole data set to identify the what you say virus data set. You can simply you can just reduce your algorithm what you say application size from 3 GB to hardly 200 MB by using transfer learning, and that way you will be able to identify the virus also, and you can just simply update that what you say training set from your server, and it will keep updating of about the new viruses, and it becomes really protective. Okay, it will classify it as virus and stop it. So that's how it is going to work. Even in operating system, which is a part of computer science, things start crashing. So I will be able to identify, okay, why my crash is happening. You will take it manually. You will identify manually. Okay, my crash is happening over there. You won't be able to identify. Suppose you have written down a code, but your code is not working. You can use machine learning over there. So it might be really complicated, but you can use machine learning over there to identify why your codes are not working. I think this model is better for answer. This is also better. See, unsupervised learning. See, each of them is having their advantages. If you go for a linear regression model, you have to provide supervised learning. So there is not a hard and fast found like rule that you have to provide this model only. Like when you have time, you can use what you say. I just forgot to supervise reconstructive neural networks itself. So like the first model which we were talking about, right? So for give me a minute. Okay, so reinforced learning. So we have supervised learning, right? Reinforced learning. The video which I showed you over here, right? It uses reinforced learning. So in reinforced learning, the environment is there. So you don't have enough data set. So what you do is you learn it with the data set. But if you can train it data using supervised learning, suppose my data points are not accurate. In that case, what I will do? I can't provide the data as a what you say supervised in the supervised model because I'm not sure about why my model being accurate. If I can say my 99% of the data or categorization which I've done is accurate, then only I will be able to provide this as a supervised learning data set. But in case of unsupervised learning data set, I can just throw the data point to that algorithm and it will be able to identify the problem. But In case of unsupervised learning dataset, see, with uncertainty, you need more resources. It will take, like in production versions, it takes 3 to 4 weeks to train a model, right? So if you are providing them unsupervised learning model, so it will take 3 4 weeks to learn. But when I provide them a supervised learning model, I know that my dataset is correct. It won't take much time. It can do the same job in one day. But the thing is, like, I have to 100% sure about my dataset. So everything is having those things. I think most of you can leave now. I will be closing the session now. Okay, thank you.